First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming out in this below freezing temperature in Washington, D.C. to take your place in history to say, no, democracy is not going to die on my watch, and to demand, absolutely demand peacefully, as we are, that our lawmakers do the same. We will never, never get this moment back. In 2 days, our lawmakers will decide not just the future of this country, but the future of the free world. They have the tools, the legal mechanism, not only the ability, but the obligation to stop an illegal presidency from destroying centuries of sacrifices for freedom. The only question is, do they have the courage? If we pass this unthinkable threshold into fascism, generations will look back to this very moment to see if they did. You know, a lot of people in Washington and around the country today are honoring the memory of President Jimmy Carter, a wonderful, wonderful, heroic, patriotic man and president that he was. In 1979, he said, "The gap between our citizens and our government has never been so wide. The people are looking for honest answers, not easy answers. Clear leadership, not false claims and evasiveness and politics as usual." You know, yesterday after our first day of this historic gathering, 14th now, it was our day of action, and we went from listening to our wonderful speakers to rallying the members of Congress, the new Congress, the 119th Congress, just hours after they were sworn in, put their hands on a Bible or their book of faith and swore an oath to the Constitution to defend our country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I got to tell you, walking through the halls of Congress, through the Cannon Building and the Russell Senate Building and Dickerson, and it was surreal almost, thinking that we are so close to this unthinkable moment where we may lose it all, seeing all, the men in their nice three-piece, their nice, Capitol suits, and the women in their pretty dresses, and just this sense that you can't, with all the nice clothes and facade and covering in the world, cover the stain that will live on the legacies of these lawmakers, the blood of democracy, if they do not choose the right thing in this moment. Now, we are all here, of course, because of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which makes it abundantly clear in black and white that insurrectionists are not qualified to be president of the United States. Donald Trump is an adjudicated insurrectionist. Our nation's preeminent constitutional scholars agree. Lawrence Tribe, Harvard constitutional law scholar, the president of CREW, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, who brought the Colorado case up through the Supreme Court, agrees that in spite of the ruling in Trump v. Anderson, Donald Trump remains disqualified. The only thing that judicial train wreck of a ruling did, to quote preeminent scholars William Bowd and Michael Paulson, the only thing that it did was remove Colorado's ability to take Trump off the ballot. It did not in any way take away the ability of Congress or the ability of anyone who has sworn an oath to the Constitution to fulfill that oath by rejecting the certification and or the swearing in of an illegal president under Section 3. And I know there has been a lot of debate. There has been really, honestly, unfortunate headwinds from those in the so-called pro-democracy space trying to make it as though the ruling in Trump v. Anderson excluded the ability for Congress to act barring new legislation. And that is just wrong. As some of our earlier speakers mentioned, all of that reference to Section 5 and new legislation being required was dicta. It was not a mandate. It was not an order. When we have a clearly corrupt and compromised Supreme Court with members on that bench who should not have even been ruling in this case, if they have not given us a decision that forecloses the opportunity to save our democracy, why on earth would we foreclose that opportunity for ourselves? The current circumstance is that Donald Trump is an adjudicated insurrectionist, disqualified, and the only mechanism to remove that disability is by a 2/3 vote of both houses. That's it. We don't need new legislation. But we do need each and every member of Congress, and I know there has been a lot of invocation today of Democratic leaders, but I frankly demand all of them who have sworn an oath to the Constitution to uphold that oath and object to the certification of Donald Trump's electors on January 20th. It only takes 1/5 of both houses of Congress. That's only 87 members of the House, which could easily be constituted by the Democrats, and 20 members of the Senate to raise an objection, and a simple majority to sustain it. A simple majority. I want to go back for a minute to the feeling yesterday in those halls of Congress. And it was mixed. We definitely got some pushback, but we also had a lot of receptivity, a lot of understanding of the gravity of this moment, of just how serious a burden is on these lawmakers and how they cannot let us down. And as we were going around, I will tell you, they knew about us. Capitol Hill knows about us. They know that we are here. They know that there are millions of Americans around the country. Maybe not all of them could make it to Washington, D.C. in 30-degree weather, but there is a groundswell movement behind us. There are our ancestors, generations of people who have put their lives on the line for this country and the free world at large. We are not okay with sitting back and not using our founding document, our divinely inspired Constitution, to save it. Are you kidding me? I'll tell you, one of the representatives, or actually now senator, that I ran into yesterday was Adam Schiff. And I've been quoting Senator Schiff a lot recently because I think he said it so perfectly. In the first impeachment, he said, to those who chose to acquit Trump, quote, your name will be tied to his with a cord of steel and for all of history. But if you find the courage to stand up to him, to speak the awful truth to his rank falsehood, your place will be among the Davids who took on Goliath. If only you will say, enough. These lawmakers know, every single one of them know. And you know what? I want to talk more about the people I met yesterday because we had receptive conversations not just with Democrats, but with Republicans and Republican staffers. And one of them said to me, as I was telling him about our movement, and I told him, I said, you know, I come from your side. I was a former Republican. I'm a person of faith deeply. God, I am nothing without God. And I related that to him and reminded him of how the person that he works for took an oath to the Constitution. And he didn't really need me to say much to him. He was there with me. He was there with us. And he said, I was there that day. I was there on January 6th. Every single one, most of them anyway. We, of course, have some new ones, but most of them were there on January 6th. They're living a really kind of pathetic and miserable life. I'm talking about the Republicans now having to be these sycophants for this poor, pathetic man who has been lying to himself all his life and just been propped up by all these self-interested power grabbers who have latched on to this caricature of a con man. What a miserable existence to have to be a sycophant to him, to have to undermine the country that you purport to love. And I do believe, in spite of how much I can't stand what they're doing most of the time, I do believe deep, deep inside they love this country. To have to suck up to a character, a sad, really man who really needs a lot of help, criminal, con artist, Russian asset like Donald Trump on a daily basis, and pretend that it's in the defense of the greatest country in the world, that city shining on a hill. I'm sure that there's more than a few of Republicans that would like to be free from that bondage, because that's exactly what it is. Another representative that I've been thinking about, and we could go through names, and I don't mind doing that. We played Jamie Raskin. We all adore Representative Raskin so much for his allegiance to the Constitution, his unwavering commitment over these years to call it as he sees it and defend the rule of law. Another one that's come to mind recently is Senator Chris Murphy. He gave an excellent speech, I think about a week and a half ago, from the floor of the Senate, talking about just how quickly and unceremoniously our freedom can be taken away from us, how it can just be gone before we know it. He really laid out the stakes, and I know most of those lawmakers in Capitol Hill understand just how much is on the line right now. And it's on the line because we have a man, as I mentioned, who is a vessel for the most corrupt, dangerous, antagonistic forces to America and freedom that this country has ever seen. They helped him get elected. This is not conspiracy. This is confirmed by the FBI. The Treasury Department sanctioned Iran and Russia just days ago for their interference in this election. We had hundreds of bomb threats on Election Day from Russian servers. This is an anti-American president, which makes sense that someone whose allegiance is not to this country would lead a deadly insurrection to stay in power for his own gain. 4 years ago, Monday, Donald Trump and his duped army of supporters stained the day of January 6th with blood and shame, betrayal and dishonor. His claims of a stolen election were investigated, debunked, and baseless, and he knew that. Yet many lawmakers who were sworn in just yesterday, also in blatant violation of the 14th Amendment, by the way, aided and abetted him. But January 6th does have a legitimate purpose, and we cannot be gaslit into believing that any objection, any legitimate use of January 6th is comparable to what Trump and his duped MAGA army did 4 years ago. You know, this is a really, really important aspect of everything that we're dealing with. We know that the MO of the Republican Party in recent years, probably for way too many, and their allies in Russian media, is projection. Accuse your enemy of the very thing that you do. And so what they did 4 years ago was so stain the day, January 6th, that some may be afraid to ever use that day for its legitimate purpose again. That if we ever do anything on January 6th, we will be called election deniers, or we will be called Stop the Steal 2.0. No, there is a legitimate purpose for January 6th. In fact, because there was an insurrection on January 6th 4 years ago, that is the very reason that we must act now to stop that insurrectionist. We cannot allow the fear of optics to stop the rule of law. And I want to say something. We know that any claims that Donald Trump has a mandate from this election are just hogwash. If you take the results at face value, The percentage of votes is less than 50%, but let me give you a number that's even more representative of the sentiment of the American people. If you take the election results at face value, Donald Trump received votes from less than a third of voting eligible adults. Just last week, there was a Washington Post poll that said that 2/3 of Americans object to the pardon of January 6th insurrectionists. Donald Trump is a January 6th insurrectionist. The sentiment in this country is not for impunity for the crimes against democracy that we have all collectively suffered. This is an injustice and a crime to the American people. What happened yesterday in the sentencing, where this man who committed crimes to get into office the first time will not receive jail time, is the most disgusting injustice and slap in the face to the American electorate. So we are not disrespecting an election by invoking the Constitution. And in fact, the founders and the drafters of Section 3 were well aware that majorities and electorates may elect insurrectionists. And they put this in place in spite of that. This is a backstop. It is a constitutional safeguard, a legal necessity to save our republic even when we do not save ourselves. Far from anti-democratic, enforcement of the 14th Amendment against an insurrectionist is the most democratic position any lawmaker could take. It is not a violation of the peaceful transfer of power. It is in defense of the peaceful transfer of power. Now, in a minute here, I'm going to introduce somebody who was deeply, personally affected by Donald Trump's deadly insurrection 4 years ago. Before I do that, I just want to remind everybody of something that you can't say too many times, and that is that there will come a day that anyone supporting Donald Trump will wake up and learn the hard way just how badly they have been duped and used, just how much their possibly love for freedom, goodwill, faith, maybe they just like someone who's a fighter. They don't like, this spinelessness that we frankly see from the Democrats and think they see the opposite on the other side, and it's appealing to them, or they're brainwashed by the Russian propaganda of Fox News like I was for 8 years. And they think they're doing the patriotic thing, but one day they're going to learn the very, very hard way when something affects their lives personally and Donald Trump's interests are going to come first, just how badly they've been used. And nobody learned that more than the supporters of Donald Trump, who were sent to their own deaths 4 years ago. These are some names we don't hear so often. We hear Ashley Babbitt. We know her story. We don't hear these other ones so often. Kevin Greeson, Roseanne Boylan, crushed to death on the steps of the Capitol, Benjamin Phillips. There was a witness at the January 6th hearing who testified with Jason Van Tatenhove, the ex-Oath Keeper. His name was Stephen Ayers, and he's a January 6th defendant. Stephen Ayers' co-defendant, Matthew Perna, took his own life as he was awaiting charges for January 6th. Donald Trump is not just an insurrectionist, illegal president-elect. He's also the leader of a death cult who sends his own supporters to their death and turns them into criminals. He turned hundreds of people into criminals 4 years ago. And some of the worst crimes that were committed led to the death of some very brave and patriotic people. As a friend of mine, Sergeant Aquilino Gonell, says, it was like a medieval battle on January 6th. A medieval battle. I can't even, we see the images, but to try to put yourself in that place of those officers, those Capitol Police officers and the Metropolitan Police, who did not have the resources to fight this army of people who came with flagpoles to try to beat them to death and storm our nation to keep Donald Trump in power when he knew he had lost an election. How sick is that? These back the blue, these men and women who put their lives on the line and work in that building with those lawmakers, same lawmakers who stood behind Donald Trump and have so conveniently, 4 years later, forgotten or wanted us to forget just what a betrayal it was. But one of those people, one of those officers, whose name you know well, is Brian Sicknick. And he lost his life after January 6th because of the actions of Donald J. Trump. He was a kind and loving brother and partner and son. He had some dachshunds, some dogs that he loved dearly. Such a kind, kind man. I've gotten to know his brothers, Craig and Ken, over the past year or so. I've had them on my show. And I'm really, really honored today to be joined by Craig Sicknick, who has been so clear in speaking out against the danger that he knows is coming in a second Donald Trump administration. This is not normal. It can be stopped. And we absolutely must demand peacefully that our lawmakers, our Congress, each and every one of them, and for that matter, anyone involved in the swearing in of an illegal, constitutionally disqualified man understands that their legacy will be forever tied to the demise of democracy. Now is the opportunity for them to do the right thing. Please join me in welcoming Craig Sicknick. Thank you so much to Josh. I didn't realize that would be my singing debut today, but thank you so much. And thank you to all of our speakers, to Craig, to Caitlin. I want to thank our speakers from yesterday, Andrea Chalupa, Mark Graber, Clifton Cash, who has been amazing out there, promoting the heck out of 14th Now all over social media. Thank you so much, Cliff. We miss you today. I want to thank everybody that showed up here today. You are patriots in the truest sense. You are putting yourselves on the line for democracy the way that generations have showed us to demonstrate peacefully, to stand up for our country. Thank you so much. You will never be forgotten. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our amazing volunteers. Thank you to all of our organizers. You know who you are. You are so loved and appreciated by millions of Americans out there. Millions of Americans are behind this movement. So I want to thank all of you. On behalf of everybody at 14th Now, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And we are going to do this. We're going to be back here tomorrow, whether you like it or not. We'll be here with our hand warmers. We'll be here with our signs because it is the last day before January 6th. This is it. This is it. We can brave the cold. Please, everybody, go to nowmarch.org. Nowmarch.org. Go to the Day of Action page. There are instructions you can still use. Pick up those phones on Monday morning. Call your senator. Call your representative. Demand that they uphold their oath to the Constitution and object to the certification of Donald J. Trump. Thank you so much, everyone. God bless this beautiful country.